This video is sponsored by Space Sleeper on Android and iOS. Oh man guys, after a month-long hiatus, One Piece is back with one hell of a return chapter. This week's color spread commemorating our new Yonko lineup goes way too hard. Even now, I still cannot believe my favorite character Buggy finally made it. What a time to be a One Piece fan. But despite this excitement, unbeknownst to the many blissful denizens of Wano, there was actually yet another battle being waged during their festivities as several scabbers united. Our newly unveiled admiral, by the name of Ryokugyu, was in the midst of making his way to the presumed location of Luffy. All the while thinking to himself, the ability to sway others, perhaps the greatest power in Luffy's arsenal, was truly something rarely seen. And as he said this, flowers began to bloom beneath his heels. But to confront him and his impromptu garden, there would indeed be several of these scabbards there to meet him. A welcoming party he would urge to turn back around while they still had the chance. Raizo would swiftly come to the realization that this troublemaker was a marine, while Denjiro discerned this to be one of Luffy's overseas adversaries. From which point Ryokugyu would make his ideology known as he questioned their understanding of the outside world. He was a firm believer that the celestial dragons are gods, and as such a country such as Wano that bears no ties to the world government was a country with no standing. And talk about a Boy Scout, this man was infuriated by this alone. What a beautiful soldier. I can see why a man such as this would flourish and bloom in an Akainu-led navy. Yet despite being so overtly aggressive, as he lunged forward with his sailing vines, Ryokugyu had the nerve to tell these people not to be mad. The hateful prejudice of the newly appointed admiral would certainly juxtapose the otherwise majestic nature of his devil fruit abilities. But before we go any further, we want to talk to you guys about Space Sleeper, a brand new game coming to Android and iOS that wonderfully blends together aesthetics from anime, cyberpunk, and pixel art. And with that, we have an abundance of really creative character designs. So far, Molly, Viddy, and X stand out the most to me, but there are a bunch of really interesting characters at that. And overall, the sound design of this game is superb and a great fit. If you enjoy 8-bit music tracks, then you are going to really like it. There are a ton of missions you can take your characters on, which have you face a number of unique enemies. The gameplay isn't too hard to get a hold of, but you will definitely need some strategy to get through the harder levels, which will of course provide you with the greatest of rewards. Space Sleeper will be officially launching in August, but you can pre-register for the game using the first link in the description for some awesome in-game rewards. Oh, and the more players pre-register, the greater the rewards will be. You should definitely use our link to pre-register on the Google Play and App Store so that the game will automatically be installed as soon as it goes online. Thanks to Space Sleeper for supporting the channel, but now, back to the topic at hand. A great expanse of foliage would swiftly claim their surroundings as trees in the shape of fists would emerge as well, from which point we would additionally receive confirmation of Ryokugyu's devil fruit. The nature-based Logia type, forest fruit. A source of life he claimed to rival even the seas, what is by and large one of the greatest forces in this world. Ryokugyu felt very strongly that this rebellious country needed to learn that humanity has only gotten as far as it has by virtue of embracing and enforcing hierarchies. As such, despite going against the wishes of his idol Akainu, Ryokugyu felt so strongly about crushing non-affiliated nations that he was here causing so much trouble, truly believing that prejudice breeds stability. So yeah, certainly not a very likable character. And I'd say it is pretty rare for a character with nature-based abilities to be so confined to rules. Typically such characters are against societies, but now taking the form of a massive tree, but looking more like a giant piece of broccoli, Ryokugyu would declare it would be as if no laws had been broken at all. He urged them to try their best to stop him, but despite their efforts, he intended to slaughter thousands of Wano citizens if it meant capturing Luffy. And man, Oda is so damn clever. He has his green-horned admiral, the likes of which may be referred to as Green Bull, have the ultimate greenery devil fruit. But on the point of him being green-horned, yeah, this guy, despite clearly being as powerful as he is as an admiral, definitely gives off noob vibes. The sheer fact that he thinks he could handle Luffy is laughable, quite honestly, which is only reinforced by the following sequence, as leaping onto the scene from elsewhere in total detestation of the villain's prior statement would be Yamato with a sizable blow to Ryokugyu's head that resembled a strike of lightning knocking a tree down. This blow was quite powerful and enough for the admiral to take note of his new adversary's impressive haki. And if that hurt, he better address Luffy as Big Wood Chipper. Considering the people of Wano had only just been relieved of Kaido and Orochi's 20-year-long tyrannical occupation, Yamato had no intention of letting this fiend ruin things. Ryokugyu would then question who this person was, only for Yamato to respond under the title of Kaido's son, which certainly caught the Admiral's attention. However, our next opponent to enter the fray would be yet another newly appointed official. Momonosuke completely agreed with Yamato's words and wouldn't allow the man to harm their recovering heroes. Shockingly, Momonosuke would begin to charge up his very own Blast Breath attack, what would have certainly been a major improvement over his display during the raid on Onigashima, perhaps cementing a newfound level of mastery over his draconic form. But it was a dud. Nothing but a puff of smoke would emerge. There would be a mixture of confusion, embarrassment, and concern to be seen. But nevertheless, Momonosuke would be quick to adapt and opt to bite into the forest man, seeking to drive him away all the same. And so despite failing to produce a breath attack, at the very least, Momonosuke's bravery and commitment to his people has been made evident. He wouldn't allow such negativity to plague the people of Wano ever again, which is a vow he took all too seriously. Momonosuke's attempts here didn't seem to bother Ryokugyu all too much. It stands to reason that such an attack devoid of haki would have no effect on your typical Logia-type user. However, the particular nuances of this fruit have yet to be revealed. For instance, by becoming such a large entity, would a haki-based attack on one of his lines harm him as much as a direct blow onto his face? All I know is one red hawk would have Luffy literally smoking his ops. Now, Ryokugyu would take note of the fact that Momonosuke was a pink dragon. Between this and the newfound knowledge of Yamato, regardless of this outcome, this guy should be able to walk away from here with some pretty valuable intel. The whole Yamato thing is interesting, sure, and worthwhile for the furtherance of Luffy's infamy, considering Yamato presently lacks a bounty, but the Momonosuke thing is honestly a much bigger deal. Remember that Dr. Vegapunk created this artificial devil fruit ability, one that he deemed to be a failure, which it is certainly not, and I find it hard to believe that such a thing would be an oversight on the part of such a brilliant scientist. Ultimately, the Celestial Dragons, as if the name wasn't evident enough, greatly covet the depiction of dragons, to the point of furthermore insisting that Dr. Vegapunk create artificial dragons for them to keep as pets. And so this intel has the potential to make major waves. Ryokugyu would be sure to ensnare Momonosuke in his vines and branches. Yet even in such peril, the new shogun of Wano insisted that Yamato stand down and stay out of the fight. Frankly, if they need Yamato, a foreigner and newly appointed, if not self-appointed member of the Straw Hats to handle their affairs, they could hardly consider themselves to be Wano's protectors. In the end, this was their fight to face. And you gotta respect Momonosuke for that. In fact, considering the prior narrative admittance that he eventually goes on to be recognized as one of Wano's greatest leaders, a living legend, this may very well be the beginning of that tale being spun. He's about to let the world government know that although Wano may be hurt, it is more like a sprained ankle. Don't play with us. But you know what? Wano at this point is just looking like the most desirable tourist destination around, as on the seas around it will be the familiar ship of Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates. The news of the new Yonko had reached them as well, and certain longtime members were in disbelief. But some were eager enough to urge Shanks to do it, to go see Luffy again now that he has become a great pirate. Shanks wouldn't immediately respond to this. Instead, he'd speak of how nostalgic these seas made him feel, that the last time he was here, they were all giving Oden a grand send-off. He even remembered little Momo and Hiyori, whom he presumed to be all grown up by now. His crew, however, weren't so concerned by such things and were mostly just eager to go see Luffy, which I'm sure could be said for many fans as well. Luffy was a very accomplished pirate now, so it only made sense for them to make good on their promise to go see him again. Meanwhile, the deadbeat Yasop wasn't ready to meet his son Usopp just yet. Now, Lime Juice, who definitely received a glow up in the last decade or so, would point out the fact that Kid was there too, recalling the fact that only just recently, he tried to pick a fight with them. Shanks from that point would then take another look at the latest paper with a smile on his face, just focusing on Luffy's latest wanted poster, which notably depicts him in his sun god form. Continuing to look at it, we'd actually flash back to the instance in which they stole Luffy's fruit from the world government. At that time on that stormy night, they'd realized that the ship they intended to raid had CP9 agents on board. However, Shanks was very much unfazed, and as such, they would do battle. Here we would get a look at a young who's who. He was confused by what these pirates could possibly be after, as they didn't really have any proper treasure. All they had on board was some minor devil fruit, a weird one that just makes a person rubbery, clearly unaware of just how special the fruit happened to be. But I mean, devil fruits can fetch pretty good prices, so mundane or not, one could argue that it is still a payday. From there, Shanks would fondly remember the time he shared with a young Luffy, all the way up to his bet on the future by sacrificing his arm for the boy's sake, doing so with a smile on his face. As he gripped onto the place of sacrifice, it was clear that rather than a loss, this was a proud and valued investment to the veteran Yonko. And you know what, as much as I enjoy Shanks reacting to Luffy becoming a Yonko, I would also like him to react to Buggy becoming a Yonko as well, considering they are childhood friends. But hey, maybe he's already well aware of what got Buggy that position. From there, we would quickly cut to some rookie pirates of the crew who were swabbing the deck. They were shocked to realize that the crew's top officers had some sort of past with, quote, the Straw Hat Luffy. Our boy is really a big timer now. In fact, one of them would speak of rumors that describe Luffy to be like an out-of-hand, rampaging demon monkey. Which is really funny on two fronts. One, the person saying this looks like a demon monkey himself. And two, it really emphasized the Sun Wukong influences behind Luffy's character that much more. But much to the dismay of certain crew members, Shanks would make it clear that he is not planning on reuniting with Luffy here, mostly on account of what was going on in their territories. As it turns out, Bartolomeo, Luffy's biggest fan and captain of both the Barto Club and the second ship of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, had been going around burning red-haired pirate flags and replacing them with Straw Hat ones. Now this shouldn't be anything new to many of us, as such developments have previously been encapsulated by way of several cover pages, but it is interesting to see it finally be of direct relevance to the story. So yeah, you could say Bart is to blame for us not getting our oh so long awaited Luffy and Shanks reunion just yet. Bit of a bummer, but hey, things don't always go as planned, so who knows what might happen. After all, of all locations, Shanks and his crew just so happen to be near Wano right now. A location Shanks hasn't been to since he was a child. This could have taken place anywhere else, but it is going on here. If even the two don't meet, frankly, it has to serve some sort of purpose. But speaking of purpose, oh man, Shanks would pull up a seat near his already seated first mate, Ben Beckman. Ben would pour him up a drink, as Shanks would rather casually question if it wasn't about time they go and claim it. Ben would shoot him a look, as rather ominously, if not suspiciously, Shanks will elaborate, the One Piece. Oh man, Shanks is finally on the move. The time has really come. This is how you know we are headed towards the end of the story here, folks. Shanks has been moving really strangely in relatively recent times, so I can't wait to see everything he has planned. Between this and One Piece film Red, we are putting the Shanks voice actor to work. Also, don't let the drinking of sake here in a conversation about the One Piece go over your heads. But hey, this chapter is still far from over. Moving our focus over to Navy headquarters, we would have a three-man meeting wherein it would be agreed that the transgressions of the Revolutionary Army could no longer be ignored. This was something Akainu knew very well, but unfortunately, they didn't have any more Marines to deploy. This is really saying something. The Marines are definitely spread thinly if that is the case. As it turns out, Sabo, recently dubbed the Flame Emperor, has become a champion to a sizable portion of the world. It would then be revealed that there was an assassination at the Reverie. And to make matters worse, this figure was a descendant of one of the original 20 kingdoms from 800 years ago. The only one to refuse celestial ascension. This descendant was King Nefertari Cobra, who we know as the King of Arabasta and Vivi's father. The headline, publicizing Sabo, Chief of Staff to the Revolutionary Army, as the man responsible. What had to be a major play for their cause indeed. Now firstly, this is One Piece, so although death is certainly a possibility at times, it is a concept which many of us express what I imagine to be reasonable skepticism. Furthermore, I highly doubt Sabo just straight murked Vivi's pops. Again, this man Cobra is a descendant of those who refused to become celestial dragons and opted to instead remain with the people of the lower world. This is a man who is deeply indebted to Sabo's brother Luffy and his friends and recognizes them to be the saviors of his people. This is almost certain to be a more elaborate play in the works. However, mere hours before doing so, the revolutionaries managed to attack the homes of the celestial dragons in the Holy Land, even going as far as to destroy a monument of the so-called Divine Dragon Claw and the symbol of the World Nobles, which was no doubt a flat-out declaration of war, as if they needed one at this point. Now understand how crazy this is. Sabo supposedly catching a body was the safest version of the true events that they could possibly release. There was no way in hell they were going to publicize the fact that rebellious vermin made their way into the land of the gods and caused trouble. And at that, oh my goodness, Sabo is a G. Recall that it was the final attempt of the legendary Rocks pirates to invade the Holy Land. Sabo and his forces actually got the job done. Mind you, Rocks had to face Garp and Roger in their prime, but hey, he had a crew of soon-to-be Yonko on his side. When it comes to this modern day matchup, however, things are hardly as impressive, as the likes of Admirals Ryokugyu and Fujitora were left in charge of defenses. But even with the budget versions of Hashirama's Woodstyle and Madara's Planetary Devastation, the rebels managed to successfully free the likes of Bartholomew Kuma, who had been enslaved by the Celestials. Perhaps the Admirals were a bit held back by being in the Holy Land, but Akainu wasn't trying to hear any excuses for their failure, which, despite being scum of the earth himself, I can respect. And man, this chapter was like an old infomercial because wait, there's more. Besides Cobra's supposed assassination, his daughter Princess Vivi had also somehow gone missing. Now this, for me, is the most suspicious part. Why? Because after tearing to shreds photos of Luffy, Blackbeard, and Shirahoshi, whose photo did the king of the world and true leader of the Celestial Dragons have in hand on their way to the empty throne before being asked by the 5 elders who they sought to eliminate? Oh yeah, Vivi. And the skeptic in me has to even question the merit of liberating Kuma, considering he could be an overgrown walking, not so talking spy cam at this point. Oda is definitely gearing up for some crazy times ahead. But here we would formally be introduced to the one unfamiliar member of this Marine meeting, the chief of the Navy Criminal Affairs Unit, Kuroma Tensei. This man to have been here at all speaks volumes, as it points towards some sort of treason being to blame for this believed to be connected incident which was currently under investigation. Akainu presumed Arabasta to be in utter chaos. Kuroma would clarify that their ship hasn't even left the Red Port just yet, as it was difficult for anyone to come or go given their present predicament. Kizaru would wonder if this meant they could possibly close the case on the attempted murder of St. Carlos. However, St. Mjosgard, the reformed Celestial Dragon, had pardoned them. And in the Holy Land, the Celestial Dragon's Knights were the only ones with jurisdiction over such disputes, making it a pretty complicated situation that was better left to the gods to handle. But one way or another, most of these troublesome incidents were connected to Sabo. It would be said that his flames of rebellion were spreading all over the world. In fact, all 8 rebelling kingdoms were actually inspired to overthrow their governments while their kings were away and returning home. They were practically worshipping Sabo as a god. And listen, the Sun God and the Flame Emperor aren't too far off from one another. And to make things even crazier, on account of Sabo's growing legend, one could say that his influence has surpassed even the likes of Dragon himself, the leader of the Revolutionary Army. He proposed to be world's worst criminal. Kizaru would then chime in by saying that his younger brother was even named an Emperor of the Sea, which I imagine for Akainu and Kizaru, who met him during Marineford, must be a pretty insane development. But to close things out, we'd have a devout follower of the Flame Emperor speak of their idol's influence expanding into even the pirate world, that his little brother had just forced the status quo on its head. And at this point, times were being forced to change. And best believe we are just as hype as this crowd. One Piece is back! And this chapter was most definitely worth the wait. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.